Football is one of the dumbest sports. It is arguably the best example of organized chaos, and compared to soccer, baseball, or basketball, it is the one where humans clearly got bored and invented something with the goal of creating madness. But within that madness or organized chaos, there's a sport where somehow beautiful things still manage to exist. The fireworks, the heroics, or underdog stories, comebacks, whatever the case, these moments, more than any other sport, they feel like miracles. Only divine intervention could allow something so special to occur within a game that makes no sense. Sure, that shortchanges the talent or skill of the players involved, but there's just these moments where no term can describe them other than miraculous. So, we put together about 2 hours worth of football miracles. First up is the miracle at the New Meadowlands. Kind of a miracle on two fronts. First, the play that ended the game is absurd. But second, one of the more miraculous things in the NFL is that Eli Manning exists. I mean, his career, his life, that's a lucky man.
It's December 19th, 2010. We're in East Rutherford, New Jersey, where the Philadelphia Eagles and New York Giants are tied at 31 in the closing seconds, and DeSean Jackson just muffed this punt. Officially, every outcome is on the table as these teams battle to control the division. You might know what comes next, but to remember how we got here, or why we really shouldn't be here, let's rewind. This image perfectly sums up the NFC East. Chaotic, sloppy, anything can happen. That said, we aren't far removed from when it felt like everything bounced Philly's way. Statistically, the Eagles are the NFC's most successful team of the last decade. 8 playoff appearances, 5 conference championship games, just 0 Lombardi trophies. Philadelphia's currently at a crossroads, trying to thread the needle between past and present. That's made for some tough recent moves. In the span of 13 months, Philadelphia said goodbye to 3 of its cornerstones. Bryans, Westbrook, and Dawkins, plus Donovan McNabb, had all been career Eagles and legendary franchise stars. Dawkins left first. The Eagles wanted to keep him, just not at the price tag offered elsewhere. Philadelphia released Westbrook as the injuries piled up for the 30-year-old running back. Uncharacteristically, he fired off a parting shot at the franchise. Basically, he didn't know if management wanted to win as badly as the players did. Interesting words as Philly cobbled together its new identity. McNabb's departure included a bit more fanfare. It had been rumored for a few years that a split loomed. McNabb voiced concerns over the team around him, specifically its lack of playmakers. He also suggested the Eagles bring in one specific playmaker, quarterback Michael Vick, a month after his release from prison. After another early exit in 2009, plus a crowded quarterback room drawing interest from other teams, the Eagles moved on from the QB they drafted 2nd overall back in 1999. Obviously, football teams are made up of more than 3 players, but the Eagles without these guys felt weird. At the same time, a youth movement had already begun in Philadelphia. Starting in 2008, they rebuilt their receiving core with top 50 picks, DeSean Jackson and Jeremy Maclin. They joined a 5th-round gem, tight end Brent Selleck, then got some rejuvenated ground support in LaShawn McCoy. With Westbrook's replacement and receiving talent that rivaled, if not surpassed, anything McNabb had early in his career, the Eagles turned the keys over not to Vick, but to Kevin Kolb, their inexperienced but talented 2007 second-round pick who received some pretty optimistic comparisons. With so much change and a tough division, expectations for 2010 urged patience. But the NFC East hates being predictable. Kolb suffered a concussion in the first half of Week 1, and up stepped Vick. The quarterback, much like the entire Eagles organization, looked to prove that this modern iteration still had plenty left in the tank. Surrounded by Philadelphia's stockpile of young offensive talent, everything clicked. There were ups and downs, sure. Vick's NFC Player of the Month was followed up by a rib injury that knocked him out for a few weeks, but in Week 10, this offense had its coming out party. Visiting McNabb in Washington, the much-anticipated Monday night matchup ended quick. An 88-yard touchdown on the first play from scrimmage, a 35-0 lead just one play into the second quarter, 6 total touchdowns for Vic. That offensive spectacle helped the Eagles vault up the divisional standings. They won 5 of their last 6 coming into today, including one over the Giants, which set the teams on a collision course for the NFC East crown. Philly's looking for their first division title in 4 years, their longest drought since Andy Reid took over. And just as importantly, they're trying to prove that their window hasn't closed. That might be easier to prove if they had the ball right here. As for New York, these Gunners have a lot of hope resting on their shoulders as they hurtle downfield. The Giants are looking for some answers. They aren't far removed from an improbable Super Bowl victory against the previously undefeated Patriots, and they'd followed that up with their best regular season since 2000. But an immediate postseason exit at the hands of the Eagles preceded an even more disappointing 2009. Injuries and an inability to beat good teams led to New York's first postseason miss since 2004. That said, entering this 2010 season, the roster still closely resembled their Super Bowl team. Despite 2009's doldrums, Eli Manning reached 4,000 yards passing for the first time in his career, made possible thanks to his young trio of receivers, including the other Steve Smith. Their two-pronged battering ram, hampered by injuries a season ago, looked ready to again support Manning on the ground. Most importantly, the veteran offensive line, one of the biggest culprits for their 2009 collapse, had an offseason to get healthy. Based on their last few seasons, experts struggled to peg how this team would fare, but many expected them to take the division. Some extra pressure to perform came by the way of their brand new $1.7 billion stadium opening up for this 2010 season. Would amenities at the new Meadowlands include a winning team? Or would tax dollars just fund heartbreak? Through their first 13 games, we still waited on a definitive answer. They jumped out to a comfortable NFC East lead, but saw it dry up following back-to-back divisional losses. Unlike a season ago, they began to right the ship for the final stretch. 3 straight wins ahead of showdown number 2 with Philly. Both teams entered today with identical records, but given how their first meeting went, New York needs the win more. Through the first 3 quarters, that absolutely showed. Everything went the Giants' way. Their defense allowed next to nothing from Philly's high-flying offense. They forced picks and fumbles, building on each Eagles' mistake to take a 24-3 halftime lead. The defense didn't let Philadelphia into the end zone until near the end of the third quarter, and even that required a short field via turnover for the Eagles' offense to pull off. Eli managed to give New York and its home crowd all the breathing room you'd think they needed, rebuilding the 21-point lead with 8 minutes and 23 seconds left. Only once in NFL history had a team come back after being down 21 with less time on the clock. Basically, the Giants were cruising. Oh, wait, nope. That's right. We are all tied up. But before we get to how the Eagles kept this game alive, it's worth remembering that when these teams play, nothing should be a surprise. Probably the rivalry's most noteworthy moment came in 1978. With the Eagles visiting New York, the Giants found themselves sitting on a 17-12 lead. 31 seconds left, ball in hand and no timeouts for Philly. New York just needed to run out the clock. But Giants quarterback Joe Pisarcik botched the handoff. The ball hit the turf and Eagles corner Herm Edwards scooped it up, returning it for 6. Giants fans know this moment as the fumble. For the rest of us, it's the miracle at the Meadowlands. Nearly a decade later to the day, these teams again found themselves vying to win the division. Locked in overtime, the Eagles had their game-winning field goal attempt blocked, which just allowed for this much more dramatic scene to unfold. Defensive end Clyde Simmons lumbered into the end zone, which helped Philly win the tiebreak and eventually the division. In 1999, again in overtime, the Giants finally got the late-game magic. Michael Strahan picked off Eagles QB Doug Peterson and took it back 44 yards to steal the win in front of a packed Philadelphia crowd. And as proof to the fact this rivalry has seen it all, they've even had a miraculous late-game punt return swing the tide. A second-year Westbrook delivered that shocking nail in New York's coffin back in 2003. Along with a flair for dramatics, each of these moments came at the expense of the home team. That history has likely flashed through the minds of the New York crowd here today. They watched with glee as their team sat in the driver's seat up 31-10, looking to take the division lead late in the season. But after the defense had done their best to keep the Eagles quiet, late in the fourth, Michael Vick remembered how to be Michael Vick. Philly's comeback attempt began with one quick score. Given the weapons available, a 65-yard touchdown to the tight end Selleck seemed least likely. Even less likely was Philly converting an onside kick right after, but when the Giants seemingly never anticipated the attempt, a perfect bounce comfortably sailed where only the Eagles could recover. That left Vick with 7.5 minutes to find 2 touchdowns. He called his own number often, covering 35 yards on one scamper before punching it in from 4 yards out. After Philly's D forced a punt, Vick again went to work. 33 yards on the ground, another 22 after that, and with 90 seconds left, Vick found Macklin for the game-tying score. 21 points in just over 6 minutes, silencing the packed New Meadowlands. The drive that followed might turn out to be even more important, though. New York took over at their own 36 with all 3 timeouts. A minute 10 remaining, New York had plenty of time to get into field goal range for a game winner. But on first down, incompletion. Second down, incompletion. They suddenly faced 3rd and 10 after just 10 seconds ticked off the clock. When Philly sacked Manning on 3rd down, that ensured at least one more play in regulation. Had either of their first 2 pass attempts been complete, or they'd called a run, clock could have hit 0. Instead, we're here. If there's any silver lining for New York, surely a punt returner facing the wrong direction chasing after the ball has little chance at a miraculous return, right? Well, let's talk about Deshaun Jackson. There are explosive players, and then there's Jackson. D-Jax burst onto the scene his sophomore year at Cal. He earned first-team All-Pac-10 honors both as a receiver and punt returner. He was named top returner in the nation thanks to 4 punt return touchdowns. That easily put him on the Eagles' radar, who ahead of the 2008 draft needed some receiving help, as well as a boost on special teams. When Philly drafted Jackson in the 2nd round, his new QB recognized the talent, but also figured no returner could fare well if the guys around him weren't blocking. While there's logic to that, with Jackson it honestly might not matter. In his first NFL game, Jackson showed that spark. 47 yards on his first career catch, a 60-yard punt return, 100-plus receiving on the day, and nearly matched that with returns. Possibly better than advertised. That said, in game number 2, he delivered a slightly more infamous moment. On what should have been Jackson's first career touchdown, after torching the Cowboys secondary, he celebrated a couple inches early and never got the ball across the goal line. That big play potential swung both ways. Later that rookie season against the Bears, after finally notching his first professional touchdown, he also fumbled on a punt return, which set up the go-ahead score for Chicago. But hey, nobody's perfect. When a rookie makes rookie mistakes, what matters is how they rebound. And in year number 2, Jackson did more than rebound. He tied the NFL record for most 50-plus yard touchdowns in a season. That included a 72-yard return and a 60-yard catch against the Giants in a Week 14 shootout that helped Philly into the playoffs and further derailed New York's season. While he's continued to be electric in 2010, today's game has been a bit of a dud for Jackson. He was held without a catch until the end of the 3rd quarter. And in the 4th, on what should have been a huge play, fumbled the ball away. The most painful part, replay showed Jackson clearly had been touched on his way down, but Andy Reid never threw the challenge flag, and the Giants were set up with a short field where they retook their 21-point lead. And now, when given a chance to really make an impact, Jackson muffed the punt. If the Giants can manage to take control of this ball, it would squash Philadelphia's historic comeback. New York could not just win this game, but retake the division lead in their quest to right the ship after a disappointing 2009. For the Eagles, in a year already packed with storylines, hope might be lost if they fumble away this chance. They've made some tough decisions, said some difficult goodbyes, but can still prove that the team's window for contention hasn't closed. And if there's anyone in the league capable of making something out of nothing, it's this guy. As the final seconds tick off the clock at the new Meadowlands, welcome to a moment in history.
Jackson bobbles it and now has to try and recover. Deshaun Jackson gets a block! Are you kidding? Deshaun Jackson still not in and now in for the touchdown, no flags.
Now, we shouldn't blame Matt Dodge. The snap was high. He got off the best punt that he could. It just happened to go to Deshaun Jackson. We're going to shift gears. We're going to go back to college. Godfrey has this one. He's got the story of the famously Catholic and therefore miracle-seeking Fighting Irish and the more non-denominational USC Trojans.
It's October 15th, 2005. The number 1 USC Trojans are trying to fight off an upset at the hands of one of their oldest rivals, the number 9 ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. USC is down to their last chance to extend the nation's longest winning streak and vie for another national championship in their dynasty run. The Irish are a tackle away from shocking the best team in college football and regaining the relevance their brand once demanded. To understand how we arrived just inches away from a change in destiny, we need to rewind. You know why this score is so shocking? Because these Southern Cal Trojans are an absolute machine, smack in the middle of a dynasty run the rest of college football can't stop. After a 500 season in Coach Pete Carroll's 2001 debut, the Trojans ripped off a 41-3 record, won a pair of Heismans, took a share of the national championship in 2003, and won the BCS outright in 2004. And these 2005 Trojans returned 14 starters from that undefeated national championship team. Things are rolling in Los Angeles. Under Carroll, USC has dominated recruiting and churned out NFL draft picks, all while embodying the shameless glamour of LA, a town that, like it or not, is college football's capital city, at least until these Trojans finally lose. Hollywood loves a show, and right now, on the heels of the Shaq-Kobe Lakers, USC is LA's favorite team. The men of Troy rode a 27-game winning streak into South Bend, and while they've certainly been tested a few times during this run, they've never been this rattled on this big a stage. No winning streak is perfect. USC has made a habit of struggling with Pac-10 sleepers on the road. But when the lights are on and the nation is watching the Trojans against a ranked opponent, they've made it a point to show why they're the best team in college football. But despite their comparative lack of talent and recent struggles, Notre Dame led this game at the half, the third time this season USC's trailed. The good news for the Trojans was that they'd outscored opponents 168-42 in the second half this year. Entering tonight, their offense was averaging 52 points a game under first-year offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin. So something is definitely off because this is the biggest of big games. Speaking of which, are those green jerseys? That must mean Notre Dame thinks this game is pretty important too. For most of modern college football, and since the advent of television broadcasts in color, Notre Dame's primary home jersey has been navy. But once in a while, when the current Irish coach decides a game is important enough, Notre Dame will switch to a green home jersey as an homage to the Irish glory of decades past. And USC knows all too well about the power of the green jersey. In 1977, the Irish switched from blue to green jerseys in warm-ups before playing Southern Cal. Notre Dame proceeded to beat the life out of the Trojans on their way to a national title in what's now known as the Trojan Horse Game, or just the Green Jersey Game to Irish fans. And the Irish are really, really good at breaking winning streaks, just like the one USC brought to town tonight. In 1957, Notre Dame beat Oklahoma 7-0 to break the Sooners' 47-game winning streak, the longest in the sport's history. In 1970, they broke Texas's 30-game run, and, maybe most impressively, their scoreless tie broke Army's 25-game winning streak in 1946 at the height of West Point's World War II dominance. Remember Miami's glory days? Notre Dame ended their 36 regular season game streak in 1988. And they've already done this to USC once before, breaking a 23-game Trojan unbeaten streak in 1973. That's exactly why first-year head coach Charlie Weis decided to make Kelly Green de rigueur. He's trying to convince his players and the nation that the Irish are waking up the echoes of their past. Notre Dame is arguably the most historic program in college football. The little Catholic college in Indiana is home to the most All-Americans and the most Heisman Trophy winners in history here in 2005. Plus, they lay claim to 11 national championships. Hell, the Irish are so storied that there are 11 other national championships Notre Dame has been awarded, but don't recognize. It's college football, don't ask. But as of late, the most historic program in college football feels dangerously close to becoming just history. It's been 12 seasons since Notre Dame was nationally relevant. They haven't finished in the AP Top 10 since 1993, which is also the last season that they won a bowl game. Weis left the Super Bowl winning New England Patriots this offseason to try and fix his alma mater, replacing two failed successors to legendary coach Lou Holtz, Bob Davie and Tyrone Willingham. In a Sports Illustrated story in April of 2005, Weis was quoted as telling his players the Irish would have a, quote, decided schematic advantage over college opponents thanks to his NFL expertise. And that is the exact kind of reckless, boisterous bravado Irish fans had been aching for. So far in just 5 games, the Irish have started with a bang. Notre Dame is 4-1, including 3 road wins over ranked teams and a win over their former coach, Willingham, at Washington. A big reason for the turnaround is Weis's work with quarterback Brady Quinn. A middling starter the previous year, Quinn is now averaging 324 passing yards a game and has a TD-INT ratio of 13-3 under the tutelage of Tom Brady's former play caller, who tells the press that sometimes he simply stops talking to Quinn if he feels like he's, quote, getting a big head. Brilliant, isn't it? But Weis is an alleged offensive guru, not a defensive one, and the early Irish transformation hasn't spread to the other side of the ball. Notre Dame is allowing 422 yards a game, putting them at 95th in the nation. To compensate for their growing pains, Notre Dame has leaned on ball control in this game, using running backs Darius Walker and Travis Thomas to grind clock and keep the Trojans off the field. And by winning on turnovers and special teams, especially a 59-yard punt return for a touchdown by Tom Zbikowski, the Irish are on the verge of breaking USC's streak. Except that USC is one of the most exciting and explosive players in college football history. This guy, Reggie Bush. The junior multi-purpose star is also the reason the Trojans have roared back in the second half. Just like he has all season, Bush has been on fire tonight. He's vexed Notre Dame for 3 touchdowns and 265 all-purpose yards. He's also the most dynamic player to date in USC's Carroll era. Thanks in part to a surreal skill set and a stupid amount of speed, Bush is an actual decided schematic advantage. He's as effective lining up at receiver as he is at running back, his traditional position. And in Kiffin's meticulous schemes, Bush has blossomed by forcing teams to account for his potential to execute multiple roles on any given play. The intended result is to create confusion that leaves Bush alone to run in space, and tonight, he's had just that. Touchdown runs of 36 and 45 yards, plus a 9-yard score that gave USC the lead for the first time in the second half. That's good, because Leinart, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, isn't having the best night. He's 17 of 32 for 301 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 picks deep in Irish territory, including this one, where he never sees corner Mike Richardson sitting on the wheel route.
Intercepted, Mike Richardson.
That's the second lowest completion percentage of his career at USC and the first time he's thrown 2 picks in a game since his first season as a starter back in 2003. But part of the reason Bush has ascended to an unstoppable status is because of Leinart's Heisman-level reputation. After throwing for over 1,000 yards in his first 3 games this season, Leinart struggled as defenses sold out to stop the Heisman winner specifically, blending schemes and blitzing aggressively. The upside was defenses weren't respecting USC's backfield of burgeoning superstars, namely Bush, and he's now over 100 yards a game for the 5th straight week. Leinart has struggled, but he's also just regained a lot of his confidence by saving the game for USC. Calling a silent audible on 4th and 9, Leinart gambled big and hit Dwayne Jarrett for this 61-yard catch and run that not only kept USC alive, but put them in scoring territory. So, Given the way things have played out, it seems like a no-brainer that Leinart and the Trojans will put the ball in Bush's hands, but the reason they've only got 7 seconds left is because they didn't, and because their head coach deeply distrusts authority. After rushes of 6 and 5 yards by Bush, USC was set up with a 1st and goal on the Irish 2-yard line with 23 seconds remaining. That's when Leinart called his own number, scrambling out of an empty backfield for the end zone after he couldn't find an open receiver. But he was stuffed midair at the 1-yard line, the collision knocking the ball out of bounds in the process. Except the game clock kept running with just 7 seconds left. Players stood confused while USC coaches desperately tried to call timeout after the clock hit zeros. The student section started to rush the field. Welcome to a moment in history. Notre Dame broke another streak, returning the Irish to national Except after a review, the officials did reset the clock to 7 seconds, determining that Leinart fumbled the ball out of bounds with time remaining. Was that too much time? Did Leinart's dive break the plane of the goal line? Was he down in bounds? What just happened? There was total chaos on the field, but neither team could do anything about it. There's no instant replay rule for this game specifically, and for that, you can thank Pete Carroll. College football's instant replay rules in 2005 are determined by conference affiliation, and in cases like Notre Dame versus USC, a non-conference game, NCAA rules state that the visiting coach can choose whether or not to use instant replay. Carroll, a longtime opponent of replay, declined the option for this game, telling the media, quote, "I don't like it. I never have." In fact, one head of officiating in the Big Ten said that, to his knowledge, USC was the only program in the country who turned down instant replay when given the option. Now, in the wake of total confusion, the Trojans have one more chance. Notre Dame has held their own on a massive national stage. Their ho-hum defense has slowed down college football's best offense enough for Quinn and the Irish to go score for score with the national champions. With no timeouts and 7 seconds left, USC isn't setting up for a field goal. The offense is still on the field, determined to avoid overtime to keep their streak alive. So, if Notre Dame makes one tackle in bounds, the game is over, and the Irish regain their glory by breaking USC's. Welcome to a moment in history.
Leinart gonna try to sneak it ahead. He got in. Touchdown, SC!
Okay, so this next one is a personal favorite of mine, despite the voice of the narrator, but I think it captures the best part of the NFL, which is the final week of the regular season, playoff spots on the line, teams watching other teams to see who can make it, tiebreakers, all that shit. And it has the red rifle involved, so that's fun.
It's December 31st, 2017. We're in Baltimore for the final week of the regular season. The Cincinnati Bengals are down 3 with 52 seconds left. Facing 4th and 12, this play will either end their season or give them a chance to finish 2017 on a higher note. For the Ravens, there's a bit more at stake. Get a stop here, and they're heading to the playoffs. But Week 17 is never that simple. To understand what really makes this moment special, we need to look at what these teams have been through, who today's heroes could be, and how this play is guaranteed to impact a locker room in Miami. We need to rewind. If you wanted the safest bet on this play, it would be Bengals QB Andy Dalton thrown to AJ Green, the wideout who has been Dalton's favorite target for his entire career. It's a connection that their head coach Marvin Lewis hopes can be made once again. These are the guys who have defined the second era of Lewis's reign in Cincinnati, a ride that many believe could be over after today. Lewis got this job back in 2003, which makes him the second longest tenured head coach in the league. But back then, the idea any coach could stick around that long seemed wild. The Bengals hadn't had a winning season in a dozen years, and many viewed the job as the worst in the league, in part because any coach would have to essentially do it with their hands tied behind their back. But Lewis, just the 6th black head coach in NFL history, didn't listen. He immediately did what 3 of his predecessors never could just by getting to 500. Then in 2005, Lewis led Cincinnati to their first division title since 1990. That division winner also had a star pairing at QB and receiver paving the way.
Carson Palmer and Chad Johnson helped define the first 8 seasons of Lewis's time in Cincinnati. Unfortunately, playoff heartbreak also defined those years. And following 2010, after just 2 wildcard weekend appearances, the band broke up. But Palmer and Johnson's 4-win finale of a season did mean that the Bengals could find some solid replacements. They selected Green 4th overall in 2011, then 1 round later got someone to throw to him. And although the hope that surrounded this team rested more in the future than the present, those rookies plus a defense on the rise said why not both? Their very first year, playoffs. 2012, playoffs. In 2013, they took the division, something they did again 2 years later. Their 5 straight postseasons was a first in franchise history. But like their predecessors, the results seemed almost unfair. There were terribly timed injuries, even more terribly timed personal fouls, and some just classic terrible play. They even suffered from the success itself. Following that 5th consecutive playoff appearance, Cincinnati coaches started getting offers elsewhere. So with a good number of new faces on their coaching staff to start 2016, both sides of the ball took a step back. It was much more apparent on offense, though, partially because A.J. Green missed time with a bad hamstring. But the 2017 season proved even with him things were off. It started with their offensive coordinator getting the boot after just 9 points across their first 2 games. The scoring improved, but they struggled to stay consistent. A 3-game skid to start December locked in another losing record with 2 games left. That coincided with a report that Lewis would allegedly be leaving Cincinnati after this season. While he brought a new level of success to the organization, this Bengals team has grown used to a different sort of disappointment. So with all they'd been through and the uncertainty ahead, a Week 17 win would be bigger than it seems on paper. Plus, added motivation came with the fact that they had the chance to keep a division rival out of the playoffs. And when the game began, they looked determined to do just that. Cincinnati opened the game with a long, methodical drive that Dalton capped off by finding tight end Tyler Kroft for a touchdown. That pair connected again in the second quarter to provide the bulk of a 17-3 lead late in the first half where the Ravens couldn't get much going on offense. But obviously, looking at the score, that has changed a bit. The Ravens have put themselves in a spot where, with 1 stop, they're off to the playoffs. And this is a team that's played well enough over the second half of 2017 to be a genuine postseason threat. These Ravens still have some familiar leaders in Joe Flacco and Terrell Suggs, but it's been a long time since they won the Super Bowl. And like Cincinnati, Baltimore struggled to stay consistent at the start of 2017. They shut out these Bengals in Week 1, beat up the historically hapless Browns a week later, then got absolutely blown out by the Jaguars. That up and down pattern continued, and Baltimore hit their Week 10 bye under 500. Over the first 9 games, Flacco had thrown more picks than touchdowns. The defense stepped up when they weren't put in tough spots, but the entire team had work to do if they wanted to make the postseason for the first time in 3 years. Veteran safety Eric Weddle pointed out that realistically some team had to make a run, so why not them? That soothsayer Weddle proved correct on all counts. Baltimore came out of their bye and won 5 of 6, with the lone loss being an extremely tight game against the then AFC leading Steelers. Turnover margin became the story of their season. Over their first 9 games, they sat at a pretty solid differential. But in the next 5 games alone, they snagged 15 takeaways to just 2 turnovers by the offense. Baltimore's secondary did much of the work, with Weddle leading the way. Do-it-all linebacker C.J. Mosley got in on the action as well, and down on the line, Suggs and Matt Judon were either forcing QBs into riskier throws or making the plays themselves. All of that helped them get to 9-6, which let the other part of Weddle's statement become true. They went on their run, but could have made life easier if they'd won all the games. Still, heading into Week 17, they were one of two AFC teams who controlled their own destiny. But as we know from the first half against the Bengals, they really didn't play like that was the case. Flacco in particular only found a groove in the way that a bowling ball finds its groove in the gutter. But then two things happened as the first half came to a close. Ravens return man Chris Moore took a kickoff 87 yards to the Cincinnati 6. Flacco then let Moore finish what he had started to cut their deficit in half. The other thing that happened occurred elsewhere. The Buffalo Bills and the Tennessee Titans both took leads into their respective halftimes. That's important because while the Ravens can get into the playoffs with a win, they could also sneak in if either the Bills or the Titans lose today. However, if all of the first half results hold, the Ravens would be the odd man out. Whether they maintained momentum from Moore's play or realized they weren't getting any help elsewhere, Baltimore figured things out. Well, first, Flacco threw a pick that Darqueze Dennard took back 89 yards for a score, but after that, Baltimore figured things out. Flacco got help from Alex Collins taking control of the ground game, and the same offense that went 3 and out 6 times in the first half managed 3 straight scoring drives. Their performance today mirrored the Baltimore season up to this point, inconsistent until it mattered most. But really what matters most is the score right here. Ravens up 3. A lead they're likely feeling pretty good about given the current state of Cincy's offense. Tyler Kroft has been the Bengals' most productive aerial threat on the day, but now he's watching from the sideline after coming down awkwardly just 1 snap ago. Green is usually guaranteed to get a look here, but on his 10 targets today, the wideout has just 2 catches for 17 yards. Baltimore has doubled Dalton's favorite guy more often than not, which will likely be the case once again. That means if someone's going to get open for Cincinnati, it'll probably be either Tyler Boyd in the slot or Brandon LaFell up top. LaFell won a Super Bowl with the Patriots, a national championship at LSU, and has had a 2017 that honestly might make him expendable, in part because of the guy to his left. Boyd has had the best day of any Bengals pass catcher currently on the field. Cincinnati drafted him 2 years ago in the second round with the hope that he could create a solid 1-2 punch alongside Green. Boyd's a strong route runner who knows how to get open, but his sophomore season has left quite a bit of room to improve. Granted, he missed 6 games with a knee injury. These are the likely suspects if the outcome of this game is going to change. And the outcome officially matters because this is the only game of consequence still being played. Just like Baltimore, Tennessee had a win and end situation. Since they did that, the last wildcard spot comes down to either the Ravens or the Bills, who are watching this moment just like us. Hey guys. Buffalo entered today knowing they needed help to make the playoffs. The fact that help could come from Cincinnati feels pretty fitting in a misery loves company sort of way. See, while the Bengals and Marvin Lewis have a rough streak of losing 7 straight wildcard games, Buffalo hasn't even had the chance to lose a playoff game since 2000. And that last chance ended with one of the most talked about walk-off touchdowns in NFL history. Then there's Buffalo's 4 straight Super Bowl losses, and at this point I should personally say I'm sorry, Bills fans. The point is that this moment is the closest the franchise has come to the playoffs in ages. It's the first time since 2004 that the Bills even entered Week 17 with a chance to make the postseason. Their playoff drought of 17 years is the longest across all 4 major North American sports. For guys like defensive tackle Kyle Williams, who's been with the Bills all 12 seasons of his career, ending that drought would mean more than just his first shot at the playoffs. It's something for the entire city of Buffalo. So now, just like us, the Bills are putting off a shower in order to watch what happens next. One play, Baltimore heads to the playoffs with a stop. The Bills' hopes are alive if the Bengals gain at least 12 yards. Luckily for Buffalo's players, since they just tuned in, they aren't aware that Cincinnati has 0 plays of 12 or more yards in the second half. If that's going to change, it'll be thanks to Andy Dalton, a guy who's gotten to play the hero quite a bit in his 7 years with Cincinnati.
One of his strengths entering the league was the classic vague statement of he's a winner. Even in a down year, he's proved that to be true, moving up to number 2 in all-time wins for Cincinnati. And although the season began with a 4-interception day while hosting these Ravens, he's helped get his team in a spot for proper payback. A first down here would give them a chance to not just end their season on a high note, but possibly ruin everything that their division rival has worked for. It could be the final moment for their longtime coach with an uncertain future. The Bills, watching in Miami, need points, but even a 4th down conversion would let them breathe. And Baltimore's defense can put a stop to all of that right here, then head to the playoffs themselves with as much momentum as any team in the AFC. It all comes down to this. 4th and 12, Bengals down 3. Welcome to a moment in history.
4th down, Dalton steps up, Dalton throws, it's complete, caught by Boyd, Tyler Boyd, touchdown, remarkable!
Oh, sorry, turn the TV back on because we need to check in on the Buffalo locker room. Bills kicker Stephen Hauschka captured his teammates devolving from grown adults to children finding out mom ordered pizza, all thanks to Tyler Boyd and Andy Dalton. The same happened for their fans hanging around Hard Rock Stadium and everyone back in Buffalo as they watched New York's only football team reach the playoffs. From there, Bills fans proved exactly how much this moment meant to them. They flooded the Dalton's Foundation, primarily with $17 donations, one for each playoff-less season. Even after the Bills exited the postseason, the money kept rolling in, totaling nearly $500,000 sent to the Dalton's charity, with another $100,000 plus for the youth athletics program that Boyd grew up a part of. And then, in the 2018 preseason, Buffalo got a chance to say thank you in person. Sports can be okay sometimes.
We're going to stay in the unexpected underdog / wacky finish territory. Here's Joe with Miracle of Miami, which means it's time to talk about Gronk the Defender.
It's December 9th, 2018. We're at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida. With 7 seconds left and the ball at their own 31-yard line, the Miami Dolphins find themselves down 5 points against the New England Patriots. This deep in their own territory, the Dolphins need to pull off nothing short of a miracle to get a win. Well, if you believe in that sort of thing, hop on in and let's see what happens. We gotta rewind. With a chance to deliver a decisive pass for his team, Ryan Tannehill is in control of the Dolphins' destiny. Which is pretty wild to think about considering how Tannehill got here. Before he was slinging the rock for the Dolphins, he was receiving it at Texas A&M University. After finishing 3rd on the roster at QB his freshman year, Tannehill transitioned to wide receiver, which he was pretty solid at. Tannehill eventually got a shot at quarterback in his junior season though. Starting QB Gerard Johnson, who beat out Tannehill 2 years prior, began having turnover issues, so Tannehill got to split the reps in a Week 8 matchup. Tannehill rose to the occasion, playing great ball, and earned the starting gig the next week, never looking back from there. It might have been unexpected timing, but Tannehill knew the opportunity would come, and he had to be ready. Tannehill's upside out of college was attached to his physical attributes. He was a big quarterback with a strong arm, able to make every throw look effortless, paired with rare athleticism and the ability to put the ball on the money, something he actually attributed to his days of being a receiver. That high upside is what landed Tannehill in Miami when the Dolphins selected him 8th overall in the 2012 draft. A pick that NFL scouts thought might have been a bit of a reach. Not only because he started very few games in college, but because of that dirty little R word scouts love to attach to prospects. He was very raw. Miami was in desperate need of a franchise quarterback though, so they were ready to take the gamble. Tannehill's pick was the first time Miami used a first-round selection on a quarterback since drafting Dan Marino in 1983, a position that they've been chasing to replace since his retirement in 2000. Since Marino's retirement, the Dolphins have started 16 different quarterbacks before drafting Tannehill. This is a franchise whose most recent success came from running backs taking the majority of snaps. So taking a chance on a dude who was more of a project couldn't be the end of the world. While Tannehill's potential was off the charts, it translated to inconsistent play and losses in the pros. He would torch defenses over the top, showing flashes of that big arm, plus the athletic ability to move in the pocket, but when he was off, it was an ugly sight. Having one of the worst offensive lines in the league certainly didn't help, but in 2016, with new head coach Adam Gase, Tannehill was beginning to prove the doubters wrong. Behind Gase, who was the chosen quarterback whisperer, Tannehill was on the path of leading the Dolphins to their first playoff berth in nearly a decade. All that potential that Tannehill flashed was finally translating into actual wins for the Fins. The wheels seemed to finally be turning for Tannehill until a torn ACL cost him the rest of the season as well as the entire 2017 season. While he was hurt in 2017, at least the world got to experience this goofball, half-ass football for one more season. Anyways, set to return this 2018 season healthy, Gase announced that Tannehill would remain the starter. He felt that Tannehill possessed rare qualities that a lot of quarterbacks don't have, and that he needed time to keep playing to learn the game. In non-coach bullshit talk, Tannehill still had extreme potential. Potential can only get you so far though if you aren't healthy. And through just 5 games of this 2018 season, Tannehill suffered a right shoulder injury that kept him out for weeks. Tannehill obviously couldn't control getting hurt, but because of his mediocre play over the years, the Dolphins were ready to potentially move on. Now with his future undecided, back under center healthy, and ready to prove himself, Tannehill has the Dolphins 1 game back from a wildcard playoff spot as they face New England. The game essentially looks over. The Pats are smiling on the sideline, knowing they're 7 seconds and a simple stop away from getting the win. Tannehill needs to show off that arm now more than ever. The Patriots know that. Shit, even the announcers know it.
With 7 seconds, maybe you have time for a quick out and then a Hail Mary for Tannehill.
And look who your Hail Mary preventer is back at the 15-yard line. None other than Gronkowski.
Wait, Gronkowski is on the field? As in tight end Rob Gronkowski? What the hell is he doing out there? Gronk has some of the surest hands in the NFL. He's proven that all throughout his career and reminded the Dolphins in this game when he snatched the ball out of the air and came down with a touchdown through traffic. But why is he in the game now? As the announcer said, the Patriots are expecting the Fins to attempt a Hail Mary. The Hail Mary has been a long-standing last-second heave towards the end zone that has generated some of the NFL's most exciting plays. The term Hail Mary became common after the Cowboys beat the Vikings in the 1975 divisional round. Cowboys quarterback Roger Staubach launched a 50-yard pass and joked after the game that he closed his eyes and said a Hail Mary prayer. The pass has evolved over time with more precise techniques rather than a chaotic desperation heave. Some quarterbacks have even gone as far as finding the exact science to make the best throw. Regardless of new approaches though, the pass is never a guaranteed success, especially when defenses have also progressed. When a ball is thrown that deep, teams have put in their top receivers and tight ends on defense to maximize their ball skills in the air because that's just what they do. With Gronk's massive 6'6" frame, there are very few people who are going to outjump him. Sending the ball 70+ yards is a lot to ask, no matter how strong of an arm Tannehill has. Plus, it's even more difficult to do so when you look at Tannehill's options. Miami's receiving core lacks height. After losing some potent weapons due to injury, Tannehill has to look to who's available. Danny Amendola leads the team in catches with his reliable play and quickness. But he's been off this game, and standing at 5'11", he isn't the best deep ball option. Kenny Stills is another speedster with excellent hands, who's played extremely well this game, but in this situation, right at 6 feet tall, he's also not an ideal target. Devontae Parker is the tallest receiver at 6'3". He's got the right size and big play athleticism for this situation, but often goes missing in games and has been a no-show today. 6'6" rookie tight end Mike Gesicki would be a great option, but he lacks the speed of others to get down the field in time to make a play. So that leaves backup running back Kenyon Drake, who struggled to find his fit in Miami. The Dolphins drafted Drake in the 3rd round of the 2016 draft. Drake was a backup at the University of Alabama, and after suffering injuries in college, scouts believed Drake would amount to nothing more than a backup in the NFL as well. Drake heard the criticism, but was confident in his skill and was ready to do whatever he could to help Miami win games. Unfortunately, the scouts were right. In 2016, Drake split carries with a backfield that was more of a running back by committee. In 2017, Drake did start 6 games after the Dolphins traded Jay Ajayi, but still came very short of that coveted 1,000-yard season. Heading into 2018, Drake was slated to get his chance to be the predominant back until Miami acquired old man Frank Gore. While Drake is technically the backup, he's looked more like the 3rd option in this game against New England. Gore has toted the rock well, but the surprise production has come from undrafted former Patriot Brandon Bolden. Where Drake has excelled, though, is his ability as a receiver out of the backfield. With solid hands and quick feet, once Drake gets in the open field, he has no problem making defenders miss, finding his way into the end zone. That's why he's on the field right now. The Hail Mary is obvious. But with Tannehill surrounded by all this speed, there's another route the Dolphins can take. When teams find themselves in this situation, their other alternative is drawing up a lateral play. Teams practice these situations just as often as the Hail Mary. A legal lateral occurs when a player throws the ball backwards to a teammate in hopes they can find some open field. There have been successful lateral plays in the NFL, but generally they get very wacky, especially when more than one lateral is involved. However, the 2003 New Orleans Saints proved that it could be done. With 6 seconds left at their own 25-yard line, down 7 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Saints tossed the ball deep, but nowhere near the end zone. After a successful completion and shaking off defenders, chaos ensued and the lateral game began. After several broken tackles and multiple laterals later, the Saints ended up in the end zone. Executing a multilateral play to perfection ain't easy, and more times than not, it ends up in nothing. These very same Saints, years later, with a divisional playoff win on the line, completed one of the worst lateral plays in history. The lateral giveth and taketh away. There has never been a multilateral walk-off game-winning touchdown in NFL history. Football is weird though, and unusual things have happened. Even in this game, while it was mostly a shootout, Miami is fortunate to only be down by 5 points. New England's lead could have easily been double digits, but the Patriots have made some uncharacteristic mistakes. On special teams, the typical automatic kicker Stephen Gostkowski missed an extra point after their first touchdown. Then late in the second quarter, with a chance to extend their lead at the goal line, the typical heady Tom Brady took an ill-advised sack with no timeouts. In the third quarter, with another chance to push the lead, Gostkowski missed a routine 42-yard field goal. These were all opportunities that New England usually capitalizes on. But football is weird, and nothing is ever guaranteed. Throughout the Patriots' mishaps, the Dolphins have a chance to walk away with a win if they get in the end zone. It'd be a huge win against their long rival, pushing them closer to a playoff berth. But more importantly, it could help build confidence in their quarterback striving to reach his full potential. With Gronk on the field, the Patriots are expecting a Hail Mary, but the Dolphins are strapped with speed and could go another route. We've seen weird shit happen before, so let's see if this ending can cook up some madness. Welcome to a moment in history.
7 seconds left. Tannehill will throw it, and this will end it after the shovel, or will it? Miami running around, circling. Oh, look out! Gronkowski didn't have the angle. Touchdown! Oh, Kenyon Drake, a miracle!
Gronk and safety are two terms that really should not be considered in any context. Do y'all remember when Gronk needed to be the spokesperson for Tide to ask people to not eat their Tide laundry detergent pods? That's a thing. Anyway, here's a clean segue. If you're a fan of the history of the Minnesota Vikings, then you'll know this moment. If you're a fan of the Vikings in a more traditional sense, then I'm sorry, but you'll also know this moment. If you're a Cardinals fan, say hi in the comments. I don't think I've ever met an Arizona Cardinals fan. I need to get down to Arizona more.
It's December 28th, 2003. We're in Tempe, Arizona for Week 17, and the Minnesota Vikings are in control. Up 5, a clock running under 10 seconds, and this down in distance is not a typo. These hometown Cardinals are in a bad spot, scrambling for a miracle touchdown to win. One last defensive stop here not only seals today for Minnesota, but delivers them the NFC North crown. If Arizona pulls this off, then the Vikings will watch the rival Packers go to the playoffs in their place. Zero pressure, Minnesota. So, to really enjoy what comes next, let's rewind. While the odds favor Minnesota here, for a variety of reasons, the score shouldn't be this close, and the stakes shouldn't be as high as they are. But standing on the precipice of destruction has become the Vikings' MO. As a new millennium dawned, Minnesota was one of the NFC's best teams. They boasted one of the more absurd wide receiver tandems ever, who had the good fortune of catching balls from Randall Cunningham and then Dante Culpepper. A potent running game, a defense not short on star power of its own, Minnesota showed exactly what they were capable of back in 1998. Both the extremely good and the, well, bad doesn't do this justice. It was more like unfortunate and then sustained heartbreak. A year later, they got greatest show on turfed before a complete brutalization from Kerry Collins thinned the ice under head coach Dennis Green. When the team regressed in 2001, that ice gave way. As Green headed out, so did the franchise's greatest receiver ever. Although Randy Moss had already cemented himself as the new top dog, the departures of Chris Carter and Coach Green headlined the change that at this point felt like a requirement if Minnesota wanted to turn a corner. Yes, veterans like Carter naturally age out of the league, but look at how his successor spoke. What the players felt so much more than the success they had was the crushing failures, the snake-bit nature of this franchise. To figure out if this team could take the next step, some tough questions needed answering. How long would Moss stick around? Could Culpepper fulfill the promise he showed as a first-year starter? Could this defense actually rise up from the basement? Well, the beginning of this 2003 season offered an emphatic yes across the board. They powered through each division rival across the opening 3 weeks, before piling up points outside of the North. Even better, the defense forced at least 3 turnovers in 5 of those victories. That made life much easier for the offense, who, even when Culpepper missed 2 weeks from injury, force-fed Moss and the team looked absolutely unstoppable. And then, they got stopped. 4 games in a row. The takeaways dried up, the giveaways ramped up, the team struggled to stay disciplined. Not only were they losing, but 3 of these 4 came against teams that would be vying for the first overall draft pick by end of season. Oh, and that other one happened to be against their most hated rivals out in Green Bay. Their strong start evaporated as Minnesota Jekyll and Hyded their way through 2003. They did manage to recover a bit, even beat some very good teams along the way, but they pinballed through the second half of the season. To further twist the knife, as the Vikings tried to prevent another season's derailment, the Packers comfortably made up ground in the race to win the division. Heading into today's regular season finale, Minnesota still fully controlled their fate. Just the prospect of not only missing the playoffs, but also gift-wrapping the division for Green Bay, it offered a new type of pain for Minnesota. I mean, Favre and the Packers already got theirs. Knowing that their own demise would directly benefit those who Minnesota hated the most, today marks a major moment for this Vikings team. A win here could serve as the spark for a team that this year showed they belong in the championship conversation, at least when firing on all cylinders. It could wash away the stink that has built up over years of falling short. And the good news for Minnesota, this deciding Week 17 showdown came against one of the league's worst teams. Yes, Arizona is currently in position where they just need a touchdown to win this game. But looking at this team, need is a funny word. The Arizona Cardinals are a bad team. They have been for a bit, and before you object, this is a statement of fact. Since moving from St. Louis in 1988, the Cardinals have just one season over 500. Even when they made the 1998 postseason, that Arizona team statistically was the worst NFL team to ever reach the playoffs, and they've struggled to play meaningful games in December ever since. Arizona's bad records have meant better draft picks, but a large reason for their bad records was the front office didn't know what to do with those high picks. When Arizona did manage to land a stud, like Simeon Rice, the player's performance priced them out of the Cardinals' plans. Maybe their best first-round choice in the 90s was when they chose to trade out of the second overall spot and let the Chargers take Ryan Leaf. That draft also nicely illustrates Arizona's conundrum of suck. Yes, they've been bad, consistently so, but they've never been the worst. Had they been fully at league bottom after the 97 season, then they'd have had first crack at Peyton Manning. Oh, and the reason they didn't get that first crack was because they won the final game of their season. So now instead, for the 2003 season, they trotted out Jeff Blake at quarterback. Blake headlined a roster that inspired some fairly brutal expectations. Things didn't get that bad in the desert, though. For one, because professional teams can't be demoted to college conferences. That's stupid. But two, Anquan Boldin came to the rescue. In the 2003 draft, the Cardinals selected Pahokie's finest in the second round, and he quickly became Blake's best friend. Arizona still suffered through a not small number of blowouts, but 3 weeks this year, a phenomenon occurred where the Cardinals' final score was higher than that of their opponent. While one man cannot right the ship on his own, Boldin's absurd rookie season showed hope was not lost for the future. And entering Week 17 with just 3 wins, the Cardinals have an even more incredible opportunity before them. After Arizona missed out on Peyton, the youngest Manning looked primed to be the first overall pick in 2004, a pick the Cardinals stand a solid chance of landing. Local reporters are salivating over the opportunity, imploring the team to throw in the towel in the name of potential salvation. However, as no one has famously said as of December 28th, 2003, and therefore I will now trademark, you play to win the game. And right here, the Cardinals are doing just that. But quickly, we should talk about this score, because even if you've watched since kickoff, this score is a shock. Simply put, Minnesota has been the better team today. They've just struggled with consistency. They absolutely cruised down the field on their opening drive, but Arizona stopped them at the 1 on 4th and goal. Drive number 2, the Vikings strung together 12 plays that ended in a missed field goal. Get points on either occasion, and the closing seconds look much different. Instead, the Cardinals squeaked out a 6-0 lead at half, possibly the worst case scenario for both franchises. But having moved the ball pretty well, the Vikings didn't change much in the second half, aside from actually getting on the scoreboard. Mo Williams ran one in, Culpepper found Moss to make it 14-6, and then with under 7 minutes to play, a field goal gave Minnesota what felt like an insurmountable 11-point lead. Now, around that same time, over in San Diego, LaDainian Tomlinson also put points on the board. I mention this because that gave the Chargers a 7-point lead over the Raiders. If that result holds, and the Cardinals lose here, then Arizona would earn the first overall pick. The first time for this franchise since their days in Chicago back in 1958. With less than 7 minutes to play and an Arizona offense that hadn't found the end zone today, this felt wrapped up. But for Minnesota, this second half mirrored their regular season. The Vikings watched as Arizona marched down the field, plodding along, seemingly oblivious that time was not on their side. They used up nearly 5 minutes, but got to a 4th and 1 on the doorstep to the goal line. With a stop here, Minnesota would have locked up the game and the division, and instead watched this goofy little juke confuse 5 Vikings and leave Steve Bush open for the only touchdown of his season. That's whoops number 1. Minnesota's defense at least prevented the 2-point conversion, keeping it a 5-point game. And surely this wouldn't be the first time Arizona converted an onside kick all season. Oh, what's that? Cardinals ball? Whoops number 2. As for whoops number 3, on the first play following that successful onside kick, this was all it took for a pass interference call that gifted Arizona 30 yards and a first down at the 31. With each new moment, the potential for another Minnesota meltdown crept more and more in view. Following this clean check down that stopped the clock, then a great effort by Nate Poole to claw well inside the 15, the Cardinals had 90 seconds to cover 13 yards for the win. So, wait, how do we get here then? Less than 10 seconds to play, plus a down and distance that feels like an error. Well, it's time to talk about the guy with the ball, Josh McCown. In 2002, when Arizona drafted McCown in the 3rd round, he fell into either the perfect or the worst case scenario. A big dude with a big arm and plenty of mobility, McCown slotted in as QB3 behind a pair of guys who each had just a year left on his contract. That meant there was a chance McCown could learn as a rookie and then have a spot open up before his very eyes if neither guy returned, which proved to be the case. But this is a team struggling from top to bottom, so the 3rd round backup quarterback could very quickly get washed out of the league. McCown knew that much to be true and understood he needed to capitalize on any chance he got. Understanding and doing are very different things, though. In his first season and a half, McCown had his number called a handful of times once a game got out of hand, which isn't the easiest spot for a young QB to get thrown into, nor is it a good opportunity for a coaching staff to know what they've got in a player. Once Arizona got tired of the Jeff Blake experiment blowing up in their faces, McCown earned the final 3 starts this season. While he didn't set the world on fire by any means, he did draw the ire of Arizona faithful by nearly winning, and thus potentially ruining their chances at replacing McCown with something shinier and brand name. Did this guy give a single fuck about that? No, of course not. He spotted the reality of his situation and would much rather justify his place in this league for as long as he can. And so with that in mind, this represented the perfect chance to show the league what he was made of. Unfortunately, Kevin Williams snagged that opportunity before McCown knew what hit him. That forced Arizona to use their final timeout with 31 seconds left, which meant it would be pretty bad if McCown got sacked again, and especially so if he coughed the ball up. The Cardinals managed to fall on top of the ball, but this mass of Minnesota bodies did their best to burn as much clock as possible. Not only has McCown been lit up on back-to-back plays and pushed back towards the 30, but this second-year pro making just his 3rd career start is now looking for a miracle, while in such a scramble that even the announcers are hollering at McCown to snap the ball.
Come on, Josh. Hurry up. If you're going to run a play, you got to run it. This is the ball game.
And so, it all comes down to this. Minnesota clinging to that 5-point lead. Clinging to one last chance to keep this season going. After years of disappointment, years of heart-wrenching endings, the Vikings can recapture the promise held at the start of this season and march into the playoffs where this team has the talent to shake things up. They just need to stop a guy who is desperate to prove he belongs in the league from pulling off the unthinkable. With the NFC North and the 1st overall pick hanging in the balance, welcome to a moment in history.
McCown for the end zone. It's caught. Nathan Poole has the touchdown. The Packers win the NFC North.
It's nice when I can say I'm sorry, Vikings fans. That means this is still an evergreen video. We're going to go back to Joe, and he's bringing Aaron Rodgers to the party, which I'm sorry. I'm also sorry, Detroit fans. Again, evergreen tweet. But hey, there's a chance that if you're watching this in the future, y'all have a Super Bowl by now. So if that's the case, Hit me in the comments. Let me know what 2035 is like. Can't wait to get there.
It's December 3rd, 2015. We're in Detroit where the hometown Lions lead the Green Bay Packers in the final seconds of a divisional showdown. Lined up at their own 21-yard line, ain't no way in hell Green Bay can find the end zone from that far out. They need a miracle. So why are we even here? Guess we gotta rewind. If Detroit gets a stop and secures the dub, they'll keep themselves alive for a chance at the postseason, which is exciting news for these fans, considering the Lions and the playoffs go together like peanut butter and poop. Historically, the Lions stink. Despite being one of the oldest franchises in the league, Detroit is one of 4 teams who have never reached the Super Bowl. Even one of the greatest running backs in the history of the game couldn't save them. Unlike those other teams though, the Lions are a unique type of trash. But turning trash into treasure following their winless 2008 season, the Lions landed the first overall pick in the draft. They selected UGA quarterback Matthew Stafford, which left fans wanting more. Detroit's faithful wanted a defensive player to get closer to their title aspirations. But come on, let's be real here. No single player could fix the Lions' mess. Plus, Stafford steered the Lions to 2 more wins in his rookie season. How can you be mad about improvement? In his 3rd year, Stafford won over the fan base by doing the unthinkable. Sure, they got smoked in the opening round of the playoffs, but for the first time and possibly ever, the Lions could say they had a legit quarterback to lead them to new heights. Having a generational talent at receiver to toss the ball to wasn't bad either. Except, the team immediately crashed. Having back-to-back losing seasons wasn't the issue, as Detroit was certainly used to that, but the team's collapse in the final stretch of the 2013 season was especially abysmal. It led to the firing of head coach Jim Schwartz. Media experts believe the team absorbed his lack of discipline. After Detroit struck out on their preferred candidate, offensive coordinator Ken Whisenhunt, they turned to Ravens OC Jim Caldwell, a decision that journalists immediately dubbed another classic Lions mistake. However, come season time, Caldwell silenced his doubters. Detroit came out firing, winning close games they typically dropped. Journalists exclaimed this was a new-look Lions squad. Detroit fell just short of being crowned Kings of the North in 2014, but their double-digit win season landed them a wild-card spot in the playoffs. They faced off against the Dallas Cowboys, and Detroit simply looked like the better team. Up 3 with an opportunity to extend their lead in the 4th quarter, the Lions got blindsided by a controversial call that ultimately helped lead the Cowboys to victory. It was yet another gut punch to a team on the verge of securing their first postseason win in over 2 decades. Even in defeat, journalists believe the Lions had shown real promise and could be playoff contenders again the following year. And here they are, just seconds away from pulling off a win to stay in the hunt. Getting a victory would be crucial, but it'll also give the Lions rare bragging rights over their hated rivals. The Lions and Packers go way back to the single bar face mask days, making their yearly matchup one of the longest running rivalries in the NFL. It's a feud where Green Bay has flat out owned Detroit. To make their relationship so special, the Packers have been right there to console the Lions in some of their lowest moments. How considerate of them. To be fair, Detroit has had some shit luck in comparison to Green Bay. The Packers have had Hall of Fame talent quarterbacks throughout their history, whereas the Lions have employed dudes who seemingly forget the rules of the game. A quality QB can do wonders, and behind their latest stud, Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay rode into the 2015 season on a 6-year playoff streak. By week 6 of this season, that streak looked like a sure lock to continue. Although, just as far as Aaron carried them, he helped lead his squad to its immediate downfall. After such a strong start, Green Bay's potent offense sputtered as Rodgers began playing well below his MVP caliber. Following 6 straight wins, the Packers dropped 4 of their next 5 games, and with little time remaining here against the Lions, it looks like another L is coming their way. Look how far Detroit's defense is backed up. This thing is a wrap. However, for the Lions, getting a win is easier said than done considering their journey to this point. After a magnificent 2014 season by their standards, Detroit entered the 2015 season in uncharted territory. They had winning expectations. With those hopes, the Lions rewarded their fan base by quickly shitting the bed. Last season, Stafford had found a groove throwing to his Pro Bowl tandem receivers, but this year, the offense took a dive. During a Week 5 matchup at home, Stafford got benched after a poor performance, leading Detroit's rambunctious bunch to rain down boos and empty out the stands early. How could you blame them? After just 5 games, the Lions had already matched their total loss count from all of last season. They managed to get their first win in Week 6, then dropped their next 2. Oh yeah, they fired their president and GM as well. While most Detroit squads would have curled up and called it a season, this team kept fighting. After a much-needed bye in Week 9, Detroit went into Green Bay and got their first win at Lambeau Field in 24 years. Yes, 24 years. Maybe that streak-breaking victory was the monkey the team needed to get off their backs, because the next week, they added another W to the column, and another after that. With 3 straight wins under their belt and newfound confidence, the Lions rolled into this matchup looking to pounce on a Green Bay team going through a funk. More than snagging W's to increase their postseason hopes, a win here would give Detroit their first season sweep over Green Bay since 1991, which they looked extremely motivated to do. The Lions came out feasting on both sides of the ball and went into halftime with a commanding 17-0 lead. Then after knocking in a field goal to make it a 20-point game to start the third quarter, things got messy. Green Bay finally got on the board with a breezy touchdown drive, which is fine until Detroit followed that up with a strip sack fumble deep in their own territory. 3 plays later, the Packers punched in another TD, turning a double-digit deficit into a 6-point game. With momentum seemingly swinging Green Bay's way, Detroit shut down the Packers' next offensive possession, then tacked on a field goal to extend their lead to 9 with a little over 7 minutes to play. Plenty of time for Green Bay to storm down the field for another tutty and cut the lead to 2. Although, with a little over 3 minutes to play, the Lions still controlled their fate. And starting off the drive in reverse, getting hit with penalties and losing yards isn't ideal. As Detroit faced a 3rd and long, backed up in their own territory, this possession had all the classic writing for a Lions meltdown. A failed conversion would put Green Bay in prime position to get the ball back for a chance to steal the win. With the snap, Stafford hung in the pocket and threaded the needle down the middle of the field for a massive gain to move the chains. You could hear the roar of the crowd echo throughout the stadium. Without any timeouts for Green Bay to stop the action, Detroit kept the ball on the ground and milked the clock before punting it off. 2 Green Bay incompletions brought us here. With 6 seconds left, and Green Bay needing to go almost the entire length of the field, this thing is a done deal. For the Packers, it'll be yet another damning loss in a season that started off with so much promise. For the Lions, it'll be a sweet season sweep over the team that's tormented them for years while inching closer back to their postseason hopes. Detroit had its moments to do what was expected of them and blow this game. But here they are, standing strong, 1 stop away from getting a tremendous win in front of their home crowd. Welcome to a moment in history.
Absolute desperation moment. In the middle of the field, to Jones, to Rodgers, How about that? Rodgers gets it the other way. He's thrown down. We got a flag. The game's not over. Grabbed him by the face mask. That was Devin Taylor.
Personal foul. Face mask.
Ah, shit. Face mask? Really? Right now? With that call, the NFL rulebook states that no game can finish with a defensive penalty. Okay, it's not the end of the world for the Lions. Now at their own 39-yard line, the Packers still have a long way to reach the end zone. The trouble for Detroit? This is probably the last guy you want to see in these types of moments. I'm sure he doesn't prefer to be in these situations, but Aaron Rodgers has proven he's more than comfortable playing from behind. Since taking over as the Packers starter in 2008, Rodgers has carried his squad to several clutch comeback wins. It's just something he hasn't needed to do much of against Detroit. Since his second ever start where he lit up the Lions in a blowout win, he's terrorized Detroit from then on. A 10-3 record is even more remarkable considering one of those losses came via the dude getting hurt in the second quarter. In 2014, when the Lions came just short of winning the division, it was Rodgers and co. who knocked them off in the final game of the season, winning the NFC North and earning a first-round bye. Something Detroit surely could have used to avoid their wildcard controversy. However, Detroit seems to have Aaron's number this year. In their first matchup this season, Rodgers had to throw the ball 61 times in a game that resulted in an L. And throughout the first 2 quarters of this game, the Lions D had Rodgers rattled. Although, after the break, Rodgers got right back to being that pesky thorn in the Lions' side. Facing a 20-point deficit, he helped orchestrate a smooth second-half comeback that included a do-or-die 4th down conversion backed up at their own 25-yard line. It was a drive that Rodgers finished off himself with a 17-yard touchdown run, slashing the lead to 2 and frustrating Detroit even more.
Aaron Rodgers runs it home.
Comebacks were nothing new to Rodgers. After a clock-killing drive that Detroit followed up with an extremely costly mistake, the Lions gave the dude that's slain them so many times one more shot to win the game. Which brings us here. When Detroit appeared to finally overcome all their bad luck and have a victory in hand, they decided to throw up on themselves at the most inopportune time. But with the Packers in need of a touchdown, the Lions can still win with a stop. It's been a roller coaster ride of a season for Rodgers and the Packers, but after being down 20 points, Green Bay has found a way to claw back. A touchdown here would not only cap off a crazy comeback, but it'll allow Rodgers and Green Bay to once again flex their supremacy over Detroit. Welcome to a moment in history.
Can the receivers get far enough down the field? Rodgers in trouble. It's going to get there. He turned 32 yesterday. Does he have a vintage moment in him? In the end zone, it is caught for the win! Richard Rodgers with a walk-off touchdown! A game ender for the Packers!
All right, now we're going to end things on a slightly different note. I mean, still, Rewinder's still a miracle, though. But totally understand if you don't want to hear about the devastation and destruction caused by Hurricane Katrina. But if you're interested in hearing the story of Steve Gleason, this one's for you. I think it's a special one and obviously extends well beyond the football field.
It's September 25th, 2006. We're at the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans. The Atlanta Falcons are getting ready to punt to the Saints early in the first quarter, and no one knows the history that they're about to witness. You probably do, and you probably also remember just a little bit about what led us up to this point. But right here, it's been such a long road just to get to this. These players, these fans filling the stadium, they know tonight is so much more than just a football game. It's worth reliving a moment that will signify the rebirth of an entire city. And for that, let's rewind. Let's start with the home team. These Saints look just a little different than they did a year ago. In 2005, New Orleans went an uninspiring 3-13. Which gave them an excuse to move on from a few pieces. After just one playoff appearance in 6 years, head coach Jim Haslett was let go. The quarterback who started for the majority of Hazlett's tenure also moved on, but Aaron Brooks had become expendable after a Saints offseason gamble. New Orleans landed Drew Brees after Miami opted to trade for Dante Culpepper. The Dolphins were reportedly scared away from Brees due to the major shoulder injury he suffered at the very end of the regular season. At this point, the jury's still out on whether or not that decision was short-sighted by Miami. But for the Saints, if this hits, they've secured a franchise player who still hasn't reached his potential. Brees is coming off a career year in yardage, doing so in an offense where LaDainian Tomlinson stole the show. New Orleans was optimistic, in part because of the new coach paired with the new quarterback. Replacing Haslett was first-year head coach Sean Payton. Payton had spent the last 3 years in Dallas, helping run the offense while serving as Bill Parcells' assistant head coach.
While the Peyton-Breeze combo was a good start towards fixing an offense that forgot how to score a season ago, there were more moves to be made. And it helped to have the second overall pick, which let them get Reggie Bush. Coming off a Heisman Trophy winning season at USC, the Saints' new toy would serve as an immediate big play threat. He'd also help take some of the load off Deuce McAllister, who after 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons had his 2005 shortened by an ACL injury. In that same draft, they also bolstered the offensive line with Jyree Evans, got some defensive help via Roman Harper, then took a 7th-round flyer on some wide receiver out of Hofstra. And jumping ahead a little bit, once real football began, everything clicked. In a Week 1 victory, McAllister rumbled for 90 yards on the ground, Bush went over 100 yards from scrimmage, and Breeze connected with Marcus Colston for a touchdown. Week 2, the result didn't change. Bush again was a threat catching balls out of the backfield, Colston notched another touchdown, and the Saints were undefeated heading into Week 3, their home opener. And home opener rarely has as much meaning as it does here tonight. The fact that they're in New Orleans, the fact that they're actually in the Superdome, it's a welcome sight barely a year after Hurricane Katrina. The last time football was played inside this building was the 2005 preseason. On August 29th, 2005, Katrina made landfall off the coast of Louisiana. We all remember the images of destruction or stories of heroism that came out of the aftermath of the hurricane. You don't need me to tell you about the devastation or the government's failures in response. But even before Katrina hit, the Saints' future in New Orleans was in doubt. In April 2005, owner Tom Benson put off talks with the state of Louisiana about stadium negotiations. With a lease running out, he wanted to wait until after the season to discuss the future. This led to theories that he could be ready to move the team, possibly to the other LA, maybe Albuquerque, but the destination that seemed to make the most sense was San Antonio. Benson's attorney made the case pretty plainly, saying Tom has a house in San Antonio, a ranch in San Antonio, and business interests in San Antonio. He likes San Antonio very much. The catastrophic effects of Katrina only ramped up this sort of talk. As the wind tore holes in the Superdome's roof, further damage to a building Benson already was hoping to replace, or at least get the state to pay for renovations too, it seemed like a guarantee this would give the owner an out. The damage was bad enough, it looked like they would need to demolish the stadium, a move that would only make it easier to void the contract and allow another city to step in. That last part would at least be the case for 2005, as the Saints had to play their home games in New York, Baton Rouge, and San Antonio, giving fans a look at their potential future. But as Benson continued to claim he was open to anything, Commissioner Paul Tagliabue stepped in to make sure New Orleans would keep their team. He met with Benson, who by that time was receiving offers to buy the Saints from people wanting to stop the move, one being Terry Bradshaw. But the commissioner was able to sway Benson, at least for now. He agreed to extend the opt-out clause until January 2007, ensuring the Saints will remain for this season. After the damage was assessed and reconstruction began, the league announced in February that the Saints would return to the Superdome for their home games, with the grand reopening happening September 25th. So, tonight. While the city is still recovering, it's already been a night of rebirth, a return to something familiar. A chance to cheer on their team in what is a pretty big matchup despite it only being week 3. That's because their opponent, although punting right here, is a threat to take the division in what could otherwise be a storybook season for the Saints. The Atlanta Falcons are also undefeated, coming into the game with an offense still working out some kinks, but are a threat to run up the score regardless. That's primarily thanks to Michael Vick and work done. Vick's still trying to be the total package on the field that he is in Madden, but that didn't keep him from being the league's 8th leading rusher through the first 2 weeks. Dunn has been even better, going over 130 yards in both games. Their incredible ground attack is paired with a defense some believe to be even more talented than the unit that led them to the NFC Championship just 2 seasons ago.
And while their wins to open the 2006 season came against two teams who didn't look to be offensive powerhouses, holding a pair of divisional opponents to a combined 9 points is no small feat. The second win was without their star offseason addition, John Abraham. Atlanta traded for the longtime Jet, who provided an immediate return in Week 1 with a pair of sacks and forced fumbles. But during that impressive Falcon debut, he also pulled his groin, which meant now for the second week in a row, the defense will have to step up without him. And already tonight, it's looking like they'll need to do their share. Atlanta got the ball to start the game, but failed to do much with it. A 6-yard rush by Dunn was followed by an incompletion. Then, facing 3rd and 4, the Falcons' punting unit almost wasn't needed. Vic rolled out to his left, but one of the other brand new Saints, Scott Fujita, came crashing down on the quarterback. Before he could even wrap up Vic, Fujita knocked the ball from his hands and sent it bouncing towards the sideline. Brian Scott came sprinting up and tried to scoop the ball on the run for an easy 6, but it took a hop through his hands and went out of bounds. And with that, we find ourselves here. Atlanta set to punt, the Saints having just missed out on a chance to emphatically show the city that they're back, and a cast of characters you might not be too familiar with. While there is plenty of star power here tonight, from the players to Green Day and U2 who performed together in pregame for some reason, this play has some lesser-known guys involved. Let's start with the punter. Michael Kanan hasn't been doing this too long, but he's shown to have a decent leg. The Falcons signed him as an undrafted free agent in 2005, and he did enough to beat out the 9-year veteran Toby Goen ahead of the season. They also called on him to handle kickoffs, which resulted in more touchbacks than any kicker not named Neil Rackers. On top of all that, he even attempted a 58-yard field goal, which he missed, but was bailed out when the Patriots called a timeout. When he got a second try, he drilled it.
This time, how about that? From 58 yards, it's good.
So heading into the 2006 season, he was slated to handle Atlanta's punting, kickoffs, and place kicking. But even though the Falcons won their first 2 games, he made just 2 of 8 field goal attempts. So they brought back Morton Anderson and let the punter focus on punting. For the Saints, there's a couple of guys worth pointing out. First off, meet Curtis DeLoach. He has been a Saint for all of 3 weeks after New Orleans claimed him off waivers from the Giants. He appeared in their first 2 games of the season without making an impact on the stat sheet, and here on this punt, that should have also been the case. He honestly shouldn't be on the field. As the return unit went on, Saints special teams coach John Bonamego realized he only had 10 guys. DeLoach was standing next to him, so he was the easy choice to take the assignment. One guy who knows what he's doing out there, though, is safety turned special teams ace Steve Gleason. He played in college at Washington State, and although the NFL didn't draft him, he did hear his name called in October for the XFL. But he never got to suit up for Birmingham, as the Saints signed him to their practice squad and by the spring had designated him to play in NFL Europe. But once called up to the active roster, Gleason found a bit of a niche. He managed to block a punt in 2002, 2003, and 2004. And while the streak ended in 2005, he did notch his first career start at strong safety in Week 7 against the Rams. And now, lined up over the left guard, Gleason's playing on behalf of the entire city. This whole Saints team is. Tonight's more than just a Monday night football game or a divisional matchup. It's a chance to remind New Orleans that the Saints are back. And as the recovery and healing continue, they'll be doing it together. And while just a play ago they had a chance to celebrate slipped through their fingers, there's still plenty of time for memories to be made. As New Orleans begins its rebirth, welcome to a moment in history.
Former Saint Morton Anderson is here for most field goals. Look out, right through! A kick block by Steve Gleason. It is scooped and scored by Curtis DeLoach. Touchdown, New Orleans!
If you made it this far, then holy shit, you're amazing. And you're probably the sort of person who would be interested in joining our Patreon. These are the names of all of our top secret agents, but if you want to start at just $5 a month, we'll give you one thing every Monday. That's a podcast, episode of Pretty Good, early access video. We're doing a 96-team fantasy league, and we're starting a survivor pool. We're having a lot of fun beyond just more content over there. Or you can just stick to the content that's coming here. It's not going anywhere, and we've got plenty more for you to enjoy. Subscribe. Drop us a comment, drop us a like. We love you. We'll see you soon.